Good morning and welcome to Mass Memorial Virtual Sunday School. Theme for the quarter, the testimony of faithful witnesses. Unit 1, faithful witnesses testify to God's promises. Sunday, June 21st, 2026. Lesson titled, A Forever Bond. The key verse, and Jonathan said to David, Go in peace, for as much as we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, The Lord be between me and thee, and between my seed and thy seed forever. And he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. 1 Samuel 20:42, King James Version. The aim for this lesson is to define how Jonathan and David's loyal love witnesses to God. Love. To develop a heart of loyalty to God. To practice loyalty and love for God through loving your neighbors. Our lesson background is from the 1 Samuel and also 2 Samuel. Dealing with the 1 Samuel, the book of 1 Samuel is believed to have been written sometime after 950 BC. This book is divided into three main sections, each of which focuses on a different person. Chapters 1 through 7 recounts the action of Samuel, the righteous priest, prophet, and the last judge of Israel. These chapters also contain the story of Hannah and her pleas to the Lord to have a son. Chapters 8 through 15 focuses on Saul, the first king of Israel. And chapters 16 through 31 describes the rise of David. Another important feature of this book is the transition from one form of government to another form of government, and we'll find out what that is in our lesson. And it also, we look at the rise of David and his relationship with Jonathan. The book of 2 Samuel, the main message of this book is the establishment of the Davidic covenant and the reality that God's eternal plan succeeds despite human flaws. This book looks at David's triumphs and moral failure as a king, showing that God is faithful to his promise to provide an everlasting kingdom through David's lineage. This book also looks at God's sovereignty and grace, showing God's incredible forgiveness for his relationship with Bathsheba. This is David's relationship with Bathsheba. This book also covers the nature of true kingship and how truly great leaders must rely on God's direction, practice justice, and submit to divine authority. That's a lesson for many leaders today. Some other important features in our lesson is Saul. Saul was the first king of Israel, and his reign was characterized by tragic personal and spiritual decline. Saul's reign began to unravel when he repeatedly overstepped his religious and royal authority. He failed to follow God's commands delivered through Samuel during a war with the Amalekites. We know that in his reign, Saul became very jealous of David. And so basically that's why he wanted to have David killed, because David was to inherit the throne after Saul and not Saul's son. So David, considered the second king of Israel, and was originally a leader in the tribe of Judah. And David's journey as king was marked by courage, violence, passion, failure, and redemption. And we know this when we look throughout the Old Testament. We see many stories related to David and his relationship to God, in spite of what he had done. And Jonathan, who is the eldest son of Saul and one of Israel's greatest warriors, he was a great person in terms of war defense and archery. He is famous for his selfless surrender of the throne, knowing God had chosen David to be Israel's next king. This is where, when we talk about love in this lesson, this is where this comes in, because once Jonathan realized that God's plan was for David to inherit the throne, then he instantly relinquished his responsibility to David. And this is where we come into our scripture lessons. Covenantal friendship established. 1 Samuel 18, 1 through 4, 20, 16 through 17, verses 32 through 34, and verse 42 in the King James Version. I will read these first three scriptures from 1 Samuel 18 and 1. And it came to pass, when he had made an end of speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. 1 Samuel 18 and 2. And Saul took him that day, and would let him go no more home to his father's house. 1 Samuel 18 and 3. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant, because he loved him as his own. When you look at these scriptures, in essence, it's saying that once Jonathan recognized that God's hand was upon David, he instantly felt a bond to him, not a romantic bond, but a bond based on loyalty and trust. And we'll see that as we get into our next scriptures. One thing about these verses, and Saul meeting with David occurred after he had defeated Goliath. And he's brought before Saul, and this is what created the immediate friendship between Jonathan and David. So Saul did welcome David, and when he came, like I said, Jonathan saw that God's hand was upon David, and God was covering David. So in the meantime, this did not sit well with Saul. And as we go to our next three verses, 1 Samuel 18:4, 20:16, and 20:17. 1 Samuel 18:4. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him, and gave it to David, and his garments, even his sword and his bow, and to his girdle. 1 Samuel 20:16. So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, let the Lord even require it at the hands of David's enemies. In other words, he was asking the Lord to cover David in his battles. 1 Samuel 20:17. And Jonathan caused David to swear again, because he loved him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. And when we go back and look at these verses, Jonathan got rid of all his military armor and gear and gave it to David. And he promised David, he said that the Lord will be with him. And the hand of the Lord was upon David, and the Lord will protect David from his enemies. So Jonathan had enough faith and obedience to what Samuel had told him that he immediately accepted David as the next king. And so this, we know that throughout history, that this was one of the things that made Saul very jealous, because in tradition, we know that the lineage of the next king should have been the eldest son of Saul, which would have been Jonathan. But that's not what happened. God said, Samuel warned that God had chosen David and not Jonathan to be king. And it's amazing how obedient Jonathan was to what Samuel had told him. But Saul could never accept this fact, that David would be king over Jonathan. Okay, when we look at verses, a covenantal relationship established. This is where the agreement between Jonathan and David comes into play. 1 Samuel 20:32. And Jonathan answered Saul his father, and said unto him, wherefore shall he be slain? What hath he done? 1 Samuel 20:33. And Saul cast a javelin at him to smite him, whereby Jonathan knew that it was determined of his father to slay David. 1 Samuel 20:34. So Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger, and did not eat no meat the second day of the month. for he was grieved for David, because his father had done him shame. Now this is how angry Saul had become. What Saul did when when Jonathan appeared before him to literally question his authority and say, why is he to be slain? What has he done? So this angered Saul, and he threw a spear at Jonathan, which is called a javelin back in the day. And so after this, David he began to flee from Saul. And we know that he was a fugitive for quite a long time, because Saul was out to kill him, to keep him from inheriting the throne. And in verse 42, and Jonathan said to David, go in peace, for as much as we have sworn of both of us in the names of the Lord, saying, the Lord be between me and thee, and between my seed and thy seed forever. And he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. After Jonathan left the house, he went and found David in the field, and this was a reinforcement of the covenant. And this covenant was not to last just through their friendship, but through generations. And we'll see that in some of our next verses. And when it talks about a covenantal relationship fulfilled, we're talking about the agreement that Jonathan made with David. And this comes from 2 Samuel 26:27 through 27, 21 and 7, King James Version. 2 Samuel, I am distressed for thee, my brother, Jonathan. Very pleasant has thou been unto me, thy love to me was wonderful, passing the love of women. Now, this is an interesting statement, but you have to remember, we're not talking about romantic love here. We're talking about love based on trust and obedience and loyalty. And the fact that Jonathan trusted God and was obedient to what God had said would come to pass, that David would be king. So this is not romantic love, even though the wording is interesting. And if we look at today, this could be turned around in the wrong way. But this lesson is about love based on loyalty and friendship and commitment to that friendship. And in 2 Samuel, it says, how are the mighty fallen, and the weapons of war perished? 2 Samuel 7, but the king spared me, first of all, the son of Jonathan and son of Saul, because of the Lord's oath that had been between David and Jonathan, the son of Saul. Now, this is actually at the end, after Saul and Jonathan went into war. They were defeated. Jonathan was killed in war, but as Saul realized his defeat, he killed himself. The war didn't kill him, he killed himself. But in the meantime, when David came upon the son of Jonathan, he spared his life because he remembered the oaths that they had sworn to each other, that their seed would be spared from generation to generation. And so this is a good lesson for us today, because we need relationships, but we need honest, trustworthy, and loyal relationships. And when we look at practical applications, we look at a real love relationship between Jonathan and David. This is a commitment, not a romantic love. This kind of love, as portrayed in our lesson, is based on loyalty, steadfastness, unwavering faithfulness, and enduring commitment. And when we look at our society today, many friendships are not based on these principles, but they are based on societal norms, money, status, and political association. When we look at Jonathan's obedience and commitment to David, we also see his obedience to God, giving up his succession to David because he knew God had appointed David to be king. This is another thing that we don't realize. Relationships are important today, and man was made to be in relationships. even God made Adam, and he made Eve for Adam. So relationships have been since from the beginning of time. So God created us to be social and relational beings. And relationally, human needs loyal friendships to shape characters, strengthen faith, to foster a sense of belonging. I think this lesson lets us know that we need long-lasting and loyal relationships in our lives. And our relationship with each other helps us to be grateful and thereby to grow in our relationship with God. So as you continue this summer, take time to be thankful for those long-lasting and loyal relationships. And I think when we look at what's happening in society, people's times have become occupied by cell phones. People don't talk to each other anymore. You know, you can't sense what a person is feeling through a text message. You can interpret that any kind of way. But if you talk to them, you can oftentimes sense something in their voice, or you sense something is not right. So relationships are very important to our well-being and our relationship with God. It's a way of communication and a way of being obedient and respectful to others. We need to treat others as we treat ourselves. And so we need to strive to keep those long-lasting relationships because they help us to be better people. So just as I said, remember as you go throughout the summer and the rest of the year, be grateful for those people that have been there for you for 30 years, 40 years, 2 months, especially the true relationships. So I hope that you've gotten something from this lesson. This first book of Samuel and the second book of Samuel actually are those books that make good television stories or good movies, because there are 3 major stories in these books. And it would be good if you took the time to read 1st and 2nd Samuel, and because it's very enlightening. You really get a feel for what was going on back in the day. So on this note, I ask you to continue with our virtual presentations. There may be some changes coming in the month of July, but I will let everyone know what those changes are. Thank you.